Have you ever been bored and thought to yourself, wow, I really don't know what to play? But then you discover a game that you start playing and you wonder to yourself, how have I never heard of this game? Where has this game been all of my life? Well, that's kind of happened to me in the past, for sure. So I remember about 8 years ago or so, having nothing really to do. I had just gotten a laptop, a really not a very powerful laptop, and I was just browsing Walmart with my parents. And like any kind of bored kid that's there with their parents while they're shopping, they let me go check out the video game section. Now, I had just gotten this laptop and I thought, you know what, it would be cool to try some computer games on it. So I walked to the computer game section and browsed through their $5 collections. You see, I didn't have a lot of money, okay? I was a young guy. So I'm looking through the $5 game section and I find this one game, and it's called Capitalism 2. It kind of catches my eye. I read the back, I look at the front, wow, this game looks kind of interesting. So I get it. And I go home, I pop it into my computer, and instantly, it was one of my favorite games of all time. Capitalism 2 was phenomenal. Now, you're probably wondering, hey, the title of this video is for Capitalism Lab. Why are you talking about Capitalism 2? Well, for anyone that's kind of familiar with this, they're basically the same thing, but Capitalism 2 is the upgraded version, and that's why I'm excited to talk about it. So anyways, I fell in love with Capitalism 2, played a little bit of multiplayer with it, had some fun with it, and even though it's a pretty dated game, and you can probably kind of tell by the graphics on the screen here, because it is the same graphics between the two, I really enjoyed it. So then when I found out that they had a newer version called Capitalism Lab, which was basically the upgraded version of Capitalism 2, I jumped on it. And that's what we're going to talk about right now. So you know what, guys, thanks for tuning in. If you like the video, of course, give me a like, hit subscribe, comment down below. But without further ado, let's jump right into this. Let's talk about what's good about this game. Now, anytime that you're playing any sort of tycoon or management game or business sim game, there's a balancing act that happens, and that's between what's fun, what's kind of reachable for the player, how accessible it is to the newer players trying to get into it, what the learning curve is, versus how realistic the game is. And I would say that this game hits that balance better than any other tycoon game that I've played. Now, I've played Wall Street Raider. That one, of course, is more on the steep learning curve side. That game is a lot more complicated, and there's no graphics to help you through. Versus other games like Zoo Tycoon, which are very hand-holdy, and they'll walk you through the whole thing. I mean, it's kind of aimed more towards kids in the first place. This game hits right in the middle. Now, what's awesome about that as well, this game will give you the options in the menu to adjust all kinds of settings in order to make it more hard for you if you prefer that. You can change how the inflation is affected. You can change how many competitors are there. You can change how good the competitors are, how good local competitors are, how many things you can import at the beginning of the game, whether you have to reinvent new technologies, whether you want to just literally disable different things off of the game as well, different city management things. You can disable the stock market, you can make the stock market more advanced, all kinds of different things, and you can also affect whether, and depending on whether you have the DLCs or not, you can change as well what your company starts as, a public corporation, private corporation. There's so many different options when it comes to the game. I mean, it's extremely customizable. And that's one of the best aspects of it. It gives players the ability to jump into the game either on kind of easy mode, hard mode. I mean, it has a tutorial, and what's cool about it as well is if you're focusing for more, or you're looking for a more focused game, you can set it up to do that. You can disable certain types of product classes out of the game already. But also what's cool, the game has a ton of pre-built scenarios that gear you towards certain games. You can try to be a fashion diva, you can control a media empire, you can start an internet company, you can literally start a company that just mines gold and tries to sell it to factories, you can start a factory that just makes jackets and sells it to stores, you can build a store company that just sells the coats. Otherwise, you can start out as one of those things and vertically integrate into the other fields to try to save money and make your company more competitive. That's what's awesome about the game. It allows you to play that however you like. You can be the manufacturer, you can be the retailer, you can be the natural resource gatherer, you can play as just a stockbroker and try to make good deals on the stock market, you can play as a research and development company or an internet company. Now, that kind of brings us into the game's super open-ended. That kind of brings us into something that this adds, and it's kind of important to maybe separate out from the regular base game, because the regular base game is great on its own, but there's a couple things to keep in mind. The game does have DLC associated with it. Now, the DLCs that are out as I made this video right here are the Subsidiary Dlc, the City Economic Simulation DLC, and the Digital Age DLC. Now, they have announced, or they kind of have been talking about a newer one called the Banking DLC. We don't have a ton of information on it yet, so we'll kind of leave that one out. But let's start with the beginning. So the base game is great. Now, one thing I will say is I have a hard time recommending the game without all the DLCs associated with it, because the DLCs do add a bunch to it. So as an example, there's the Subsidiary DLC, and it kind of does what its name says. It allows you to create companies under your company that can specialize in different things. So if you just want to focus on investing, you can create a retail company under your company that will basically do all that work for you, and you can, hire different CEOs who have different specializations to run the company for you. That one, is pretty straightforward right there. Then there's City Economic Simulation. I will honestly say I've dabbled the least amount in this. This actually lets you invest into politics and try to influence the laws that are there so that it can help your corporation. As an example, you can try to lower corporate tax rates to try to help your company. And also you can play games as kind of the mayor of the town. You can take over as mayor of the town and handle the budget that way, issue out bonds, different things like that. The other one is the Digital Age DLC, and I think a lot of people have a consensus that this one tends to be kind of the most fun. It adds a whole different aspect of the game. So now this game has really jumped into the modern era. It allows you to play as a media company that's, basically you can create your e-commerce firm. You can create a company like Amazon now. You can create a company like Facebook or Google. Any of those companies that are out there, you can create eBay. They have different firms out there, even like Netflix you can create. All kinds of these big companies that you can create now in this game. And one thing I always say when I talk to people about this game and they're not sure kind of how open-ended it is, I'll always say, name a company out there, any company that you can think of, and I almost guarantee you can run basically a version of that company in this game. That's how open-ended it is. And that's what Digital Age does. That's what brought all these modern companies in. And one of my favorite ways to play is to set up something like an Amazon company. You set up warehouses, you make them pull products in from other people's factories, and then you resell them on your e-commerce firm is what it's called in the game, where you can resell them over the internet. And it's an absolutely fascinating game because there's so many different ways you can pivot into different economic situations. And there's been so many times where I've played the game, tried to go one way, turned out it wasn't making that much money, and I had to take as much money as I had left and try to maybe go into debt to try to pivot into a different business strategy to try to get out of it. And those are the most fun games to play. That's what's fascinating about them. Now, other than that, besides the customizability with all of that, it all it builds the game all together. So the DLCs are what you're going to want in order to kind of get the game all together there. Other than that, things that are phenomenal about this game, it all kind of ties back into that customizability and what you're allowed to do. But one thing that it opens up as well, and the people were smart when they made this game, they opened it up to different mods out there. So there actually is a mod community that does affect different things. There's some player-built scenarios, things like that really add a tremendous amount to the game. But that's kind of the main things we can look at there. What we're looking is like a full market simulation that you can jump into and create whatever company you want. But, enough about kind of what we're talking about with the good things. Maybe we should jump into a little bit more of the things I don't really like about the game, because there are a couple that I'd like to go over. So a couple of bad things about the game, and there are a couple, unfortunately. One, as you can see on the screen, the game's graphics aren't great. It's an older game, and even the newer updated Capitalism Lab, which is fairly new, it's still very dated looking. And of course they're not making all new like 3D assets or anything like that. And I'm not even upset really so much about that graphics look. The biggest issue that I have with it is more of a resolution issue. And as an example, one thing that I do have as a problem with this game is it does not allow you to do simple things like Alt-Tab out of it without crashing the game. You have to make sure that you save pretty frequently because it does lock down your resolution, which is pretty irritating honestly for the game. Other than that, with the game, something I'm not a big fan of is performance. Now, it really pains me, and the game would have 100 times more replayability in my eyes, but if it didn't have this issue. But essentially what happens is when the game starts, it goes day by day, like a lot of Paradox games that are out there. But in the first 5 to 10 years, it will go by fast. Every couple of seconds, it'll be a month. It goes by blindingly fast. But then once you hit about 5-10 years in, once companies get more established and there's a little bit more going on, you'll start noticing that it takes 1 or 2 seconds for each day to go by. What did take 1 or 2 seconds for each month to go by, now it's 1 or 2 seconds for each day to go by. And the game will go extremely slow that way. It almost becomes unplayable. And there's been so many games where I've been having a good time just to have it almost kind of ruined by how slow the game gets. You know, you want to have that faster speed. You know, if I wanted to experience a slow kind of pace, maybe I'd try to start a business in real life like this, and I deal with it day by day, 8 hours a day going into it. But that's not what I want. I want faster paced. And you know what? Let me choose the pace. And even on the fastest speed, it gets slowed down. Now, this will depend on how fast your computer is. Mainly, from what I've kind of read around, it seems like the limitation is just the older engine that's there. It can only process one thing at a time for the most part. And so when, you know, so many things are going on, no matter how fast your computer gets, you're going to experience a pretty major slowdown mid to late way through the game. Now, like I said, this almost makes the mid or late game unplayable, which is unfortunate because, I mean, it's a phenomenal game, and that's where a lot of the juicy stuff happens. You're established, that's where you want to start targeting other companies and trying to shut down other companies, but it makes it not worth it because sometimes you have to make a 10 or 20 year plan in order to shut down another company or in order to really take the fight to another company on their field. But I don't want to sit down for 3 hours for 10 years in game. Not when it took 10 minutes for the first 10 years. It really slows down too much, and it's something that needs to be fixed going forward in the game. Now, another thing that I'm not a fan in, and it's weird because they had it in Capitalism 2, but not in Capitalism Lab, is the multiplayer. I thought it was really weird that they didn't bring multiplayer over. I'm sure it was just, you know, it's one of those things. It probably costs too much money. It's too much work. They have to worry about that whole workload on the side. But that was one of the funnest things in Capitalism 2 was being able to build up your own company. And as an example, what if I built up a company that made coats? And what if you had a big retail store? And what if I was running into problems as a manufacturer and I said, hey man, what would it take? What price would I have to give you in order for you to sell my coats in all of your stores? Because I need this. I need someone to be buying my coats for my manufacturing things, or else I'm going to go bankrupt. You know, it's fun making those scenarios together. I mean, it's the difference from playing against an AI in Civilization versus playing against a player in Civilization. You know, we have our own kind of goals and our own motives for what we do, and I think that's an important loss that the game doesn't have. And kind of the final thing that I'm not a big fan of with this game, and this is maybe the biggest gripe and the biggest thing holding them back, I would say, if I had to guess, is that you can't buy the game on any of the widely used platforms. Things like Steam. You know, they have Capitalism 2 on there, and at least from when this video was made, Capitalism Lab was not on there. So they have things like Capitalism 2 and the first Capitalism on Steam, but not Capitalism Lab. And Capitalism Lab is kind of their flagship now, which is kind of weird that they wouldn't advertise that. No, you have to go to the Enlight store, which is the company that makes it, Enlight Industries or Studios or whatever. You have to go to their store and you have to buy the game through them, which would be one thing if it was pretty simple, but it's kind of a hassle. It's one of those, you know, definitely a dated kind of website look. You get in there, you buy it, and then you have to wait for the link to come in, and they're trying to advertise other games to you as you're getting them. It's very frustrating. I'd much rather have them just put it on a platform like Steam, have it get the name out there. I'm sure they have their reasons, but it's something that really turned me off away from the game, and I don't know, it kind of confused me as to why they were doing that. So there it is, we kind of looked at both sides there. Now, of course, I'm definitely biased when it comes to this game. I love this game. It's probably one of my most played games on computer. It's a time-killing game, honestly. It's fun just to jump into. You know, the benefits, of course, being the unlimited customizability, the scenarios, the ability to create whatever company that you want in the sphere, as well as its accessibility to newer players, I think is awesome. The negatives, no multiplayer, you have to go through their store to get it, and the performance, the mid to late game slowdown almost kind of balances it right out. Overall, I would say I definitely recommend the game. I would give it maybe like a 7 out of 10, honestly. If they fix performance, it would be a 9 out of 10. Performance is the biggest holdup for me. That's the biggest thing to keep in mind. But the game is super fun. If you enjoy tycoon games or retail or simulation or business simulation games, get this game. If you've ever wanted to play around in a game where it's like, oh, what if I created this type of company? Man, go out there, just get the game. I'll put a link in the description. For real, just check it out. It's phenomenal. You won't regret it. Even if you want to kind of dabble your feet in the water a little bit, you can even go on Steam and get Capitalism 2. It's a lot cheaper. It tends to be very fun as well. It's probably about 60% as fun as Capitalism Lab, but I mean, they're all phenomenal games. But other than that, guys, I mean, thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this. I mean, I just kind of went on a rant about it and just talked about one of my favorite games that's out there that unfortunately has a couple of holdups. I mean, feel free to, like I said, hit the like button, subscribe, comment, and comment down below as well what you think about Capitalism Lab. Do you think the 7 out of 10 is fairly accurate? Would you give it more? Would you give it less? What do you think the good things are about Cap Lab? And what do you think the bad things are? I'd really like to hear that. And also, what do you want to see going forward with Capitalism Lab? I want to see that as well. So like I said, guys, enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you have a good one.